So we all know the popularity of the TV version of Dark Shadows, but a lot of people may not know there was two kind of spin-off movies of the series. Night of Dark Shadows, which we'll be talking about later on, and this one, the first in the series of the sequels, something called House of Dark Shadows. Now this is more of a compressed version of the main plot of the Dark Shadows TV series. Now, it was a full-length horror film directed by Dan Curtis, based on, like I said, his Dark Shadows television series of the same name, which ran on ABC for 5 years, from 66 to 71. Now, this was a cult favorite, was shown originally in black and white, went into color. Now, in the film expansion or compression, the way you want to look at it, vampire Barnabas Collins, Johnson Frid, searches for a cure for vampirism so he can marry a woman who resembles his long-lost fiancée, Josette, played by the very beautiful Catherine Lee Scott. Now, filming took place at Lyndhurst Estate in Tarrytown, New York, with additional footage at nearby Sleepy Hollow Cemetery. Now, Curtis followed this film 1 year later with, of course, Night of Dark Shadows, another expansion of the Shadows franchise, dealing with the witch Angelique, which was the the main enemy of Barnabas in the regular, Barnabas oeuvre of Dark Shadows. Now, the basic plot is this. Willie Loomis, the Collins family handyman, is searching for old treasure in the family mausoleum when he accidentally frees Barnabas Collins, a 175-year-old vampire who enslaves him. We're not sure how long he was tied in the casket because the chains were around it, but some people say like 165 to about 180 years. Upon his release, he attacks Daphne Budd, secretary to the Collingwoods matriarch, Elizabeth Collins Stoddard. She is discovered by Jeff Clark, who takes her back to the house where Dr. Julia Hoffman administers medical attention to her. Now, Barnabas then introduces himself to the family under the guise of a cousin from England. Elizabeth and the others are intrigued by Barnabas and take an instant liking to him. Barnabas insists on moving into the old house and hosting a ball in honor of the family. However, in the night of the ball, Elizabeth's daughter, Carolyn Stoddard, who for some reason becomes extremely attracted to Barnabas, is bitten by Barnabas while she's getting ready. Later on at the ball, he is introduced to young David Collins' governess and Jeff's girlfriend, Maggie Evans, Catherine Lee Scott, and is instantly smitten with her as she bears a striking resemblance to his long-lost fiancée, Josette Dupré. Maggie is thinking about leaving Collingwood, but Barnabas persuades her to stay. Now, back at the old house, he tells Willie about Josette and how she took her own life on the night they were to be married. Carolyn overhears and threatens to expose him out of jealousy. Enraged, Barnabas delivers a deadly bite to Carolyn, much to Willie's horror. A shaken Willie takes Carolyn back home. She slowly walks to the doorway, but is she soon discovered slumped in the doorway, dead by the maid, Mrs. Johnson. So a lot of parallels with the Dracula, female concubines and stuff. Now, funeral services are then held for Caroline, and she is buried in the Collins family mausoleum. And you all know what happens when this happens, because she's going to rise back up. Now, Dr. Hoffman analyzes samples of Carolyn's blood and recognizes trace elements of the same unknown virus that was present in Daphne Budd's blood sample, like DNA style. Professor T. Elliot Stokes, a friend of the family, confers with Julia Hoffman and tells her that the recent attacks in Collingsport may have been caused by a vampire. So the scenario here is supposed to be southern Maine, kind of like, the coastal cold. But I think you do it quite well. But the only problem I'm having with the movie so far here is the night-to-day, day-to-night shooting, which was kind of an NBC night gallery style of the early 1970s. And here it works and doesn't work, but we'll get into that in a minute. Now, Carolyn eventually rises as a vampire and almost attacks David. Stokes and Julia try to explain, but Elizabeth and Roger refuse to listen. Carolyn's former fiancé Todd encounters her, and she bites him. After he's taken back to Collingwood, the family realizes that Stokes and Julia were correct about the vampires. Todd again sneaks out in search of Caroline, but she is cornered and stalked and instantly and is eventually killed. Now, Julie eventually discovers that Barnabas is the vampire responsible. She visits him at the old house and convinces him that she can use her methods to make him human, and he reluctantly agrees. Julie gives him injections which allow him to walk in the daylight. Over time, Barnabas and Maggie begin to spend more time together while Jeff is away in Boston. Now, Stokes eventually confronts Julia about helping Barnabas, and realizing she's in love with him, reminds her that he is in love with Maggie. Now, overcome with jealousy, Julia gives Barnabas an injection which causes him to age rapidly. Out of rage, he strangles her to death, doesn't bite her out, which is a weird plot point. A terrified Maggie witnesses this and tries to flee, but is caught and bitten by Barnabas before she can escape, and he vows to come back for her. Now, Jeff does return, and he's informed of the family history by Stokes and Roger, and then Barnabas intends to make Maggie his bride. That night, Barnabas bites Maggie again, rejuvenating him, and then abducts her. Now, Jeff and the others pursue them. However, Roger and Stokes are eventually killed, off camera, of course. Jeff eventually finds Maggie at the old church in a trance and in Josette's wedding gown. Willie warns them against trying to stop Barnabas and knocks him out. Willie then leads Maggie out of the room to where Barnabas is waiting. He leads her down on an altar and is about to bite her when Jeff wakes up and shoots at him. But Willie, running to stop Barnabas, moves in the way and is hit by Jeff's crossbow bolt. So we don't know if Willie's a part vampire, but it does kill him. Now Barnabas lures Jeff out of the hiding place and forces him to be a witness by placing him in a trance. However, as Barnabas attempts to bite Maggie in the what I call the vampire munch, he screams in pain as he's stuck in the back by the crossbow. Turning around, he's shocked and enraged to discover that it was Willie, in his final act of redemption, who stabbed him with the crossbow bolt. Barnabas strangles and mortally wounded Willie, but Loomis's attack breaks Jeff out of Barnabas' trance long enough for Jeff to finish driving the bolt through the vampire's back, ultimately bursting through his bloody chest. Maggie, now revived, is rescued by Jeff, both briefly observing the bodies of the presumably dead vampire and Willie Loomis before departing the ruined chapel. In a post-credit scene, Barnabas' body transforms into a bat and then vanishes. Now, the idea of the Dark Shadows movie was being pitched around 1968. The project was finally given a green light at MGM by company president James Aubrey in 1970. Curtis decided to use the original Barnabas storyline as the basis for the film, but with a modified conclusion. The film was shot in 6 weeks for what was then a good budget for a TV sequel of $750,000. Principal shooting took place at several historical locations, like I mentioned, and production also had to work around the scheduled public tours of the house. Additional footage was shot at the Sleepy Hollow location, and part of the locales also appeared on the Dark Shadows series as well. Some interior scenes were filmed in the Norwalk, Connecticut region. Now, along with the original cast, Curtis added other actors to the cast, including Jerry Lacey, who played Reverend Trask in the 1795 storyline, Terry Crawford and Michael Stroker, who did the Dark Shadows 1890 segments, Don Briscoe, who played Kerr's brothers Chris and Tom Jennings, Dennis Patrick, who played Paul Stoddard and Jason McGuire, and George DeCenzo, who did more behind-the-scenes work on the last 2 years of the show. Now, unrestricted by TV censors, the film, which I tend to agree, is more graphically violent than its television counterpart, with dripping vampire bites and bloody deaths, but it's more comic book blood, as we say. The film was released at the height of the TV show's popularity, to great commercial success. Some rentals say around 2 million. I think it was more than that because there was a lot of nighttime showings and midnight showings and drive-in that it was hard to track down, but it made 3 times back its budget. Now, Dark Shadows producer Dan Curtis' original idea had been to edit together footage from the original TV series into a feature-length film, an idea that was quickly abandoned. The TV series was still in production when the film was being made. Some characters had to be temporarily written out of the show so that the actors would be available to appear in the movie. Barnabas, for example, was trapped in his coffin on a TV show by a failed writer who wanted to use the vampire's life story as the basis for a novel. Now, during the time of filming, several actors were written out the TV series so they could be available to shoot the movie, including Catherine Lee Scott, Jonathan Frid, Grayson Hall, John Carlin, Nancy Barrett, Louis Edmonds, Don Briscoe, Joan Bennett, and David Hennessy. Now, the preview version of the film, including the scene where young David Collins pretends to hang himself, is removed because there was a concern about some children might try this at home. No copies of this footage are known to exist. Another scene that was shown in some theaters as just testing out the crossbow before pursuing Barnabas. Now, the paperback novelization of the film by Marilyn Ross who also had written a series of novels based on a TV show, was published in October 1970. Now, the novel is based on the original script and contains some scenes which were either cut from the movie or were never filmed. Now, the second film in the series was supposed to bring back Barnabas, and it was to be called Curse of Dark Shadows. But before the pre-production could begin, the series had gone off the air, and Jonathan Frid, fearing being typecast as Barnabas, which he was, had moved on to other things, including an Oliver Stone movie, which I don't want to talk about, very bad Canadian horror flick. Instead, Night of Dark Shadows was made, focusing on Collingwood after new hero Quentin Collins, David Selby, who played the werewolf of the family, takes over. Elizabeth Stoddard gets a brief mention in the film, but is not present. Now, House of Dark Shadows have been released on many video streams, including VHS, a two-sided Laserdisc, and on iTunes, PlayStation, DVD, and for rental at Amazon Unbox. Now, Warner Home Video announced a re-release of both films on DVD in 2012, and Dark Shadows was released for the first time alongside Night of Dark Shadows on DVD and Blu-ray on October 30th, 2012. Now, the DVD and Blu-ray release of House of Dark Shadows was the first film to be released in the U.S. with a GP rating. Now, how good is this movie? Well, it's at least 3.5 stars out of 4. Because it's MGM, is going to have the great MGM style music score. The music score of this is terrific. I really think the editing on this is quite terrible. It was cobbled together almost like you would see on Tailings from the Floor. But it holds up because, the Barnabas character. But see, what I really don't understand, most of the female characters in this movie were obsessed with Barnabas. There was three major women, and, no offense to Jonathan Frid. He was gay in real life, and he didn't come across as like a George Hamilton Lothario. I really think they should redo this movie with George Clooney in the lead. I would love to see that. But Jonathan Frid, the charisma that he had, but what was kind of weird, not to sound weird, but he acted more like with his cane and his clothing. He looked like, the troubled vampire. If anybody thought about the troubled vampire, because we had Christopher Lee and Jack Palance and Bela Lugosi and all these different vampires, but he was almost like the anti-hero vampire. He created the anti-hero of the vampire genre. And I think one reason it holds up, it really, really was a very gothic style romance, which was very popular in the early 70s. I lived through that because it's all kind of gothic romance comic books back in the day. But the sexuality of being bitten. But like I said, Jonathan Frid wasn't the most handsome guy on that planet. So it has more to do with the concept. Because anybody could see a man they liked in the Jonathan Frid Barnabas character. And not to sound weird, Dark Shadows was never big in Canada until the show was taken off and reshown later on PBS and different stations. But Dark Shadows, again, it's 54 years later, and we're still talking about it. So that means Barnabas will live forever, whether he gets this stake or not. Sorry, a little bit of a burst, but every time I talk about Jonathan Frid, I kind of wonder if somebody's coming behind me, like that. So one time I get a little bit scared, I have the hiccups, like that. Have a good day. Bye.